Peace. Welcome to the Knowledge of Self radio show. My name is Teray Allah.
Peace, Jakil Najallah.
Peace, Jarulullah.
And we would like to welcome you back to this show on what we call Cypher See Truth on the Equality Day, which is October the 6th, 2013. Beginning with our sponsor. Our sponsor is Global Position Solutions, and you can find them at gpsolution.net. Also, check out our website titled Knowledge of Self Radio Show .weebly.com. That's where you can find us. And in addition to that, why don't we go ahead and mention our email?
Okay, it's actually knowledge of self radio.weebly.com. In the email, it's ko19radio@gmail.com.
And the Twitter
is
joint.
at KOS Radio 123.
Yeah. Hey guys, you want more?
The Facebook group is Knowledge of Self Radio, right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Peace. So, that's why I'm always working with the Supreme Minds, because passwords and things of that nature, gotta write them down. So, in any case, today's show is dedicated to the father of civilization. And I wanted to start this show out, first of all, with the title, which is something that I think we all can relate to. Why I'm the father of civilization and not your baby's daddy. So that's basically what I consider the title of the whole meaning of this program. We're redefining ourselves as black men, but not only that, as black fathers, sons, whether we nephews or cousins, so forth and so on. Before I read the quote, I did want to say this because we always like to address certain things in everyday life that we see. Just from my observance, I need to make a couple of these comments. To begin with, it's just my opinion that a man who's wealthy and has no children is not better than a man who is considered poor of resources and that man is raising his family. So that's one of the first things that I wanted to share with you. Secondly, there is no excuse as to why a person who has children, yet they're poor in resources, should not take responsibility for their family, which includes themselves. In addition to that, this is a message for our black women, and I can just say women in general. The struggle of being a father in America, especially if you are considered an original man, is a struggle that very few people can compare to any other experience in life. So in saying that, I wanted to share this quote, and it's by Will Smith. And he says, "There's so much negative imagery of black fatherhood. I've got tons of friends that are doing the right thing by their kids and doing the right thing as a father. How come that's not as newsworthy?" So why don't we just pass that around the round table? I want to hear what everybody thinks about Brother Will Smith's comments.
Well, it's good to hear Will, actually making a statement that, deals with some real science. It's obviously one of those things that we can see daily as far as, when you watch television. It's very rare that you see a strong black father taking care of his children. Generally, if you see a show, there's a broken home, or the father's not there, or it's about a adult that grew up without a father, and then that becomes his scapegoat for the reason why he is the way that he is.
Right.
So I think the imagery gets imprinted in our minds as something that is a norm for us, and we accept it, and that becomes, for us as black men, it might make us a little bit more likely to leave a situation as opposed to staying there and holding strong and making sure that foundation is there.
It does kind of give you that what Bush and Obama seem to lack is that exit strategy.
Go into the exit strategy, brother.
Growing up, we had, like the Cosbys, right? So that was a an example of a black family that was kind of released together, right? And nowadays, kind of touch on what you were building on. Not only do you not really see shows where uh, black families are represented in a positive light, you see the male being demasculized in this situation, um, and so we know, as we talked about in previous shows, the media influence and the psychological effect that has on the person, right? So when you come into a situation to where you father a child by a woman and it's not necessarily working out, you don't think Bill Cosby, what was it, Claire and right? You think MTV teenage pregnancy whatever show, right? And you're like, well, man, the hell with this, I'm out.
Yeah.
That's what they expect of me anyway. There's no standard for me of staying there and being that role model.
Even good times where things was really tough on them, but they still stayed together as a family. You don't
Yeah,
see
good
those
times. There you go. That's what I was
Mm-hmm.
thinking.
And I'm glad you mentioned that. Great minds are always in the same universal realm.
Right.
But I know the sister that played Florida Evans. She basically told I don't know, whoever it was that put that show together, that she was not going to do the show if they didn't add on a man into that particular show. She was totally against doing a show being a single black parent. And that was one of the one of those negotiations that apparently went through, and it worked out for the best.
Yeah, and so when do you see people taking a stand like that nowadays, as it relates to, say, our culture or our black people? You don't see these actors saying, well, no, I'm not going to do that same role again. You know what I mean? Well, it happens. Don't get me wrong. It does happen. Because I was actually watching a little interview with, what's the brother who played O-Dog and...
Lorenzo Tate?
Yeah. And he says that he, strays away from certain types of roles based on them being a monotonous type of role for, for black men. So, I mean, it does happen, but I think the bigger name people really need to take that stand. I know Denzel does it too, but, I think, there's a lot of names that you can name that tend to take these roles that, don't necessarily put us in a positive light. You know what I mean? So.
True indeed. That's a good discussion there. Well, why don't we go ahead and get into our current events of today? And I would like to pass it over to Jaquil Knowledge Allah, and he has like 3 good current events to hit you with. So, Jaquil.
Yes, sir. Peace. So, man, first thing I kind of wanted to hit you guys with is the whole, the closing down all these monuments. DC monuments, all over America, national parks are being closed down. Now, what's funny about that is some of these parks that are private are still being closed down based on government not having money. So beyond all that, the interesting thing about that is that to keep these places closed, they're sending out armed feds who are getting paid like overtime now to be there, right, in a lot of areas.
And the government has no money.
And they have no money, but they're paying people money that they don't have to keep people out from looking at these monuments. So all the veterans, there's actually a report in, I want to say, CNN News, where the veterans actually, I don't want to use the words broke in because it sounds like they were wrong. But the veterans actually made it into one of the monuments in D.C. despite being kicked or trying to be blocked from entering there. Yeah, so I just think that's interesting how we don't have money to keep the government running, but we were just going to go to war with Syria, and now we're paying federal officers and cops overtime, right? Which means you're getting now double what you would have gotten if you were just normally on clock to keep people out from going to a place. As if you need the government to have a park.
Wow.
Not only that, doing some research for the show, there were some websites that I went to that they closed down these websites and claimed that they don't have the appropriate money or fundings to keep these websites open. Yeah. Now, just in case you guys don't know, because not everyone has a website, you don't necessarily pay month by month. Right, so right, you pay for your year subscription. So how is it, not the end of the year, and you can't keep the website open. What does that have to do with the other one that would have already been paid for?
Right.
Seems like a scam.
Wow. Unbelievable. It's going to be interesting to see what comes out of that. I know Supreme Understanding has a video on there where he's talking a little bit about the government shutdown. And out of all the things that he said, it's important for us to do our own research and stop believing Fox News and all these other, you know, pseudo knowledge information agencies from telling us why that's going on.
And that to me ties into fatherhood, because I don't think people really ever elevate themselves to that degree. Because as a father, that means that you're responsible. So by you being responsible, that means everything that's in your head, you should have research to make sure that it's the truth.
Right.
Because you have people underneath you relying upon that information.
Right.
So if you're going to the media to get information and just taking them on face value, then that means that media is the father of you.
Indeed, that's a good point. You had a couple of more, guys.
Oh,
okay.
Yeah,
so
I'm not trying to
give
hide
it over
it.
to Room indeed.
Okay, yeah. So mine's the title of mine is actually fracking can cause earthquakes, but so can oil and gas extraction. Now,
wait, say that again.
Fracking can cause earthquakes, but so can oil and gas extraction. New report documents seismic activity related to host of energy technology. So basically, fracking is when they go into the earth and basically, cause chaos to take certain energies out that they're going to use, I guess to make money off, So, it's not so much the technology that stood out to me, is just that if you know how to make an earthquake happen based on you, going into the earth and you figured out, oh, wait, if I do this and this makes this, shake.
Right.
Let's all look back to, what was it, 2000 and I think it was like maybe 2008 when, the Haiti earthquake went down.
Yeah.
All these earthquakes in a row went down.
Yeah.
I think it was prior to me even having knowledge of self, but to me, I was like, "What? This just seems suspect, right?"
So,
Even back then, I was like, I bet they can make earthquakes happen." But I didn't really know the science, but here it is. So.
Yeah. It's funny that you say that. The president of Venezuela, help me with this name.
Chavez?
Here. Yeah, Chavez.
Yeah.
He's openly accused America of causing earthquakes. and Jesse Ventura did that show, which I was surprised was on cable TV, and they were talking about so much truth. That was just right there in front of people, but no one really paid attention to it.
Wow.
But one of those things he talked about was HARP, and how we covered that on the show actually, and how through the use of HARP they're actually able to cause earthquakes too.
Yeah. Then when you look, you got to look at the Earth as it's a living organism, right? So you go inside of any organism and you start stirring things up.
Yeah.
There's going to be some sort of reaction to that.
Right.
You know what I mean? So it's clear.
Wow. Thank you for that.
Oh yeah, no question.
Well, this is a news report that I caught coming out of CNN.com. And it's a woman by the name of Dana Holmes, a Caucasian woman who was arrested for DUI in Louisiana. And what incurred as a result of her being arrested was, unfortunately, a strip search, which was also caught on camera, of course, through the surveillance cameras in the LaSalle County Jail in Louisiana.
They had to look for Al Qaeda.
They had to look for Al Qaeda.
Yeah, you never know. Al Qaeda could be hiding in her pants. Go to strip search them.
It's unbelievable.
Makes
Basically, her feeling, of course, is that she was extremely frightened by the actions of the sheriffs. And it needs to be said that at least one female sheriff was present during this unwarranted strip search. So basically, there'll be more news coming from this particular situation because, of course, a lawsuit is pending. So just keep an eye on that, among other things that's going on with law enforcement agencies.
Yeah, I think one of the important things about that story is that, a lot of the times we see the white on black crime, right, or white privilege, white supremacy. Not to say that those things don't exist and that they're not real things, but at the same time, the people who are ultimately at control, I think, don't necessarily care if, like Michael Jackson said, it doesn't matter if you're black or white, right? And they're just out to get, you regardless. You know what I mean? And they use that as part of the divide, right? If you have black and white fighting amongst each other, they're never going to look at us as a whole and see what they're doing. When we've got one of the news articles I wanted to get into also was Obama, 2 days into the government shutdown, was taking portraits with with a photographer. So my thing is, the government is shut down. Day 1. Day 2 goes by. Government's still shut down. And the best thing that you could do is take a picture.
Right.
Have a photographer photograph you, because that's the important thing that's going on right now.
It's the influence of hip hop, man. I mean, we're gonna be flashy regardless of what's going on.
He does chill with Jay-Z. Maybe he's big pimping, right?
There you go.
That dude off his shoulder. First that government shutdown off his shoulder.
Well, hey, all I can say is that people, it's really important that you research more. It seems like as time goes on, people are more and more being kept ignorant by mass media. And please don't get caught up in the image. Get caught up, not necessarily caught up, but look at what people are doing as opposed to being stuck on their image.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And how that all looks in camera and in lights and in the newspaper. Some of us are so caught up in the style of a person that we fail to recognize that person may or may not be doing the correct things for us, and it's not necessarily just celebrities, but people in general,
right?
But I wanted you to take it forward to add on with the other current events.
Oh yeah, sure, indeed. So my other current event comes from actually Infowars.com, but it's actually linked to a report in Scientific America, and basically it's dealing with hackers being able to take over brain implant chips that scientists are going to put inside people's brains to help them deal with mood disorders. So the scientists are saying that they're able to reboot the brain, right, thus fixing that mental disorder. But as hackers have talked about in the past, even with pacemakers, right? They're like, we can take these things over. And so if we can take them over, the government can take them over. And then you got to start thinking, okay, look, if you have access to put a chip into someone's brain that will effectively change their mood, right? I can go from being a nice, calm guy to a raving psychopathic killer.
Right.
At the push of a button. And so now, you have to look at, possible Manchurian candidate type events, right? Where recently we've been seeing all these shootings where all these people on these psychotropic drugs that have been known to cause the effects that those people are doing. Meaning, you take these drugs, it makes you want to go out and commit mass murders and plan to do mass murders and kill a bunch of people. That's what it says on the insert of the drug. But so if you don't need to give people drugs anymore to do that, now you can just do it with a brain chip. You put the chip in their head and say, hey, look, you don't need to take these drugs. Ooh, good. I can save money on my healthcare costs. Go Obamacare. Right. But now I can be turned into a psychopathic killer at any moment.
Right. But then think of the repercussions of that too, because then you could see them saying that the individual who committed this heinous crime, his chip was,
tampered with
by some hacker.
Right.
Meaning that we need to put more constraints on individuals in computers and things of that nature.
Yeah, no doubt.
And I'm glad you brought that up because one of our shows, I was blessed to be able to do a show with Life where we talked about the RFID.
Yeah.
So again, everything continues to reoccur on our show where we hit you with information from all its different angles. Okay, so what the brother shared is very important because now, since we're talking about a chip that can be implanted in people's brains, and then be used to change people's moods, I think the petri dish for this particular type of technology would definitely be on soldiers, because that's more or less where it would fit. Would they use it on inmates? Sure, if you want to keep inmates calm and
So
passive.
Let's look at for those who haven't seen it, look at Terminator 2.
Ooh.
Oh,
It was all about the chip.
Yeah,
true
You know?
no
Remember?
doubt, no doubt.
It was all
That's
about
right.
that chip.
We got to do that show, guy, where how is cinema being used to predict what these dirty deed-oriented people are doing?
Man,
you know,
really
it's
do.
out there, man.
Yeah.
The silver screen. There's something important that we're missing. True indeed. Did we have any more current events? I know that's pretty much it. I'll give you guys a current event.
Okay.
On my way here, I was driving on the 10 West Freeway out here in Los Angeles, and right over there around Temple City Boulevard, I think I saw a drone flying up in the air. And it was white, and I mean pastel color white. And I said to myself when I looked at it, is that a remote control plane? Nah, impossible.
Impossible.
Something that big couldn't possibly be a remote control plane. So, just so that you know, I did see a drone plane flying around for whatever reason. It was pretty low too. That's why it was kind of interesting to see. When you look at them at first, you know, because you're driving on the freeway, you know, it's what you call, I took a double take, and I said, is that a plane? And then I looked at it again and said, that is a plane.
Is it Superman? No, it's a drone.
Yeah,
oh, man.
I didn't see a flying white man. I saw a flying white plane. So the interesting thing is that, you know, as much as people want to go to sleep on the reality that we're broadcasting on this show, if you take a look around, you should see some of the changes, excuse me, that's taking place in our society. And, you know, they're not hiding it. And now the question is, what are you going to do about it?
Right.
So, you know, just prepare for some significant changes, man.
Yeah, no doubt. As we've talked about on the show, multiple places, LA, California being one of those places, have been doing preparations for martial law, right? And so I'm sure you guys, if you pay attention, you'll notice the increase of maybe helicopters flying around in your areas a little bit more.
Different types of helicopters too, more military type helicopters.
Yeah. You notice the police are being more militarized, right? And the type of vehicles they're driving, firearms, things like that, even with funding. So, you know, definitely there's something going down. You know, you just got to be aware of it. On another note, California did sign a law, so I guess I have another current event.
Take it there.
I got to do a little bit more research in it. But basically, California did sign a law that they would not disappear anyone, meaning that, you know how people are getting taken away and then they sent to Guantanamo camp or some military camp and no one knows what happened to you. California signed a law that they would not do that here in California. So, and that's based on pressure that, you know, you put on your congressman and your state legislator and senator, representative. So, you know, definitely don't feel helpless. There's definitely something you can do, right? You just gotta you can't be lazy. Right?
Yeah, you gotta be the father.
Yeah, exactly. Bruce Lee would say, knowing is not enough.
Go ahead, Bruce. One of our yellow seeds. Indeed. Well, on that note, why don't we go ahead and take a break, and we'll come back at you in a few moments. And again, you're on the Knowledge Yourself radio show. Peace.
Man, Bruce is a deep brother.
You know what I'm saying? Peace. Welcome back to the Knowledge of Self radio show. My name is Teray Allah.
Peace, Jakil Allah.
Peace, Yarullah.
And we're going to get into the show again. It's titled, I love this title, Why I'm the Father of Civilization and Not Your Baby's Daddy. So let's begin by introducing the questions that we based our research and discussion on today. The first one is, are statistics accurate about how many black men are in their child or children's lives? Does the media portrayal of black men as bad fathers help make black men bad fathers? Number 3, how does the woman's influence cause black men to not be in their child's or children's life?
Number 4, what is the difference between a father and a baby's daddy? Should the original man be held responsible for what Caucasians have done to the planet? Number 6, what does fatherhood equate to? 7, how does religion dilute the idea of fatherhood? And how does religion prevent you from reaching your highest potential?
Okay, 8, what are the social obstacles that prevent black men from being good fathers? 9, what do black women fail to recognize about the struggle of being a black father in American society and abroad? 10, why do some women fail to see the importance of raising children with a man? 11, how has the image of black fatherhood changed on television since the 90s, i.e. Cosby Show, Family Matters, and shows of that nature?
Wow.
Right, Family Matters.
Family Matters, brother. You know,
Steve
among
Urkel.
others.
Right.
Even Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. You know?
The smart guy about the original child who was a genius.
I missed that one. Okay.
Yeah. You know, Raven. You remember Raven?
Okay.
That's
Man, we got a bunch of them, man.
Yeah, was Sister, I think.
Sister, huh?
Right. You guys go back into the archives, man.
Yeah.
I mean, there were a lot of positive black shows, man, that they took off the air for one reason or another. Well, let's begin with the first portion of this program, which is what does it mean to be a father? So we're just going to pass it around the round table in terms of defining fatherhood. Would anyone like to go first? I'll go last.
Yeah, I'll just jump in. You know, I would say, well, first of all, before you get to fatherhood, right, you got father. So I would say father is not necessarily just the person who biologically created that child, but that person, father is also another word for like prototype, right? And so the father is what someone is kind of looking up to be, right? And so as far as fatherhood, I would say fatherhood is the journey that one takes to set himself up to be that example or that prototype of what that next generation needs to try to shoot for and surpass.
So fatherhood would be like the culture of being a father.
Right.
Okay. That's deep. Yeah.
True indeed.
I see that. Yeah, to me, a father is or fatherhood is simply like, you know, like he said, he basically broke it down, but it's just taking responsibility, you know, first and foremost for yourself, and realizing that you shouldn't really be, you know, overly dependent on outside sources. Like, it should be more dependent on what's inside, so that, you know, your children and your black woman can depend on you. Right. Or they know that they can depend on you. You know.
No, but you had it right though. You got to know you can depend on
you
first.
That's true too. That's true too. You know, because if you don't know, then they won't know.
Right. And I think just piggybacking on what both of you said, I think a true father is the one that establishes that legacy in the family. He's the one that's going to establish, among other things, the tradition, the culture, and what exactly is supposed to be passed down, not only to his children, but, you know, around, you know, to people that are also around him as well. You know what I mean? He doesn't limit that teaching that's given to his family. He doesn't reserve it just for his family. He also passes it along to people who are not in his immediate family. So it's called, you know, I mean, because this month commemorates our 49th year as a nation, the 5%. And one of the things the father was successful, the father whom we call Allah, was successful at doing was teaching not only people within his immediate family, but people outside of his immediate physical family, so to speak. And that's why we're here today, I know for a fact. But more than that, we take the lessons as established by the father, and we've absorbed that into our own lives and interpreted it and passed it along like we're doing today and with our own children as well. And I think really the father always tries to make the people around him better than he is. And I think that's what I try to do in my comings and goings, especially my own son. I try to teach them to where they can be better off in life than I am. You know what I mean? So like I tell my students, one day I want to see you, drive past me in a car of your choice, and that you're making double, if not triple, of what I'm making. Right. Because one day I might want to borrow $1 from you.
Right? Yeah, I think one thing. Right. No, I think one thing you touched on as far as the limits. I think with the father, he should really be teaching those under him that there's no limitations.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like I think with a mother, she wants to make sure that that no harm comes upon her offspring. She wants to be sure that they're comfortable. And those types of things, that's her nature. But I think the father is the one who's supposed to show them that, okay, you do have a stable and comfortable environment to come to, but you need to be able to expand yourself, to the highest limits. And you have that ability to do that. Right. And as a father, you should be not pushing your children, but you should be showing them that, okay, it's okay to hurt yourself doing something. You just get up, shake it off, and keep it moving.
Yeah. No, it's funny that I was laughing because I was thinking, the father is the one who's got his kid on the cliff, and he's like, "Wow, Dad, I'm supposed to jump off of this?" And then the dad's like, "Yeah, let me show you." He jumps off, and then he comes back, and he's like, "Okay, did you see how I did it? Go ahead and jump." And maybe the kid's a little scared, and the father's like, "Yeah, right. You'll be all right, kid." Yeah, jumps right, whereas the mother's gonna be like, well, it's cool if you don't want to jump, and she's going to want to more protect. So, like you were saying, the mother wants to provide that environment for safety, whereas the father's like, okay, now that you have this environment, you need to explore it and kind of master it, master yourself, and be able to use that to the best.
Now, I want to make this clear. I'm not saying that one position is better than the other.
Yeah.
Meaning motherhood is less than fatherhood or vice versa. It's equality, so each is needed for that child to be balanced.
Yeah,
let's get that out the way for sure. So that's what I wanted to build on as relates to that.
Sure, indeed, that's deep. I wanted to open this up because this was really controversial when it first came out. I can't believe. I want to double check this date, but if you check out AmericanRhetoric.com. You can find a copy of Bill Cosby's address to the NAACP on the 50th anniversary of the Brown versus Board of Education decision. And this was delivered on May the 17th, 2004 at Constitutional Hall in Washington, D.C. So these were just some really interesting comments by Bill Cosby. And whether we agree with these comments or not, I think it's still something that we should bring up for discussion because, when people who are older than us begin speaking on some of the things that they're seeing day in and day out, we either have to prove them wrong or we have to absorb the fact that quite possibly they may be telling the truth about our generation.
Right.
So,
before you go into that, guys, can you give a little background? What's Brown versus Board?
In case
people don't know.
Right. So one of the attorneys that I mentioned, Thurgood Marshall, was one of the people who was involved in challenging the segregation of schools. So apparently this decision, which was a lawsuit, or I shouldn't say a lawsuit, but a legal decision made in Topeka, Kansas, which basically made the segregation of schools unconstitutional, and that's what it was decided on. And apparently that was like the beacon of desegregating the school system. And it's so ironic because, you know, even though you have a choice to go to whatever school you want to, that's a lie.
Complete lie.
Because they have something called home schools, you know, where your child has to go to his or her home school regardless of how poorly it's performing. But for the most part, that's what led to the decision.
Okay.
So,
yeah, thanks.
in saying that, Bill Cosby, he says, "Ladies and gentlemen, these people they opened the doors. They gave us the right, and today, ladies and gentlemen, in our cities and public schools, we have 50% dropout. In our own neighborhood, we have men in prison. No longer is a person embarrassed because they're pregnant without a husband. No longer is a boy considered an embarrassment if he tries to run away from being the father of the unmarried child. Ladies and gentlemen, in lower economic and lower middle economic people are not holding their end in this deal." This was the part that's really controversial. "In the neighborhood that most of us grew up in, parenting is not going on. In the old days, you couldn't hooky school because every drawn shade was an eye. And before your mother got off the bus into the house, she knew exactly where you had gone, who had gone into the house, and where you got on whatever you had one, and where you got it from. Parents don't know that today. I'm talking about these people who cry when their son is standing there in an orange suit. Where were you when he was 2? Where were you when he was 12? Where were you when he was 18? And how come you don't know he had a pistol? And where is his father? And why don't you know where he is? And why doesn't the father show up to talk to this boy?"
That's deep because the part that stood out to me is the neighbor. You know, there's a verse on "Stakes Is High," a De La Soul album.
Ooh.
You know, where he says neighborhoods are now hoods, and nobody's our neighbors. They're just animals behaving with the animal behavior or something to that effect. You know, so
good musical reference. De La Soul, "The Stakes Is High."
Yeah, so you could see that, you know, the separation from a time when people were connected, you know, as a complete unit. You just didn't live in the neighborhood; you were part of the neighborhood. Like, you know, you looked after the next door neighbor's children. You looked after their house. You could leave town and know that your house is going to be, you know, looked after. You didn't have to worry about your neighbors creeping in and trying to climb in and get into your belongings. So what would y'all say that how did that separation occur? When did things start to change?
Wow.
That's a deep one.
When crack hit? like another musical reference, Big, you know, when Big's talking about things unchanged, you know, he gives you the verse how things was all sweet.
Right.
And then when crack hit the scene, it was just
all
hell broke loose. So.
Yeah, I'd say that's a definite point that you can point to in time and space where things probably changed a lot. Maybe even a little before that, you know, heroin and whatnot. Yeah, man, I would have to say that a lot of that comes down to the overexpress, and maybe we need to talk about that on the show. But the overexpressiveness of the I. You know what I mean? Meaning it's all about me. And so when you see someone else's kids doing something, you're like, yeah, whatever. That's that person's kid. My kid's not doing that, or maybe I don't even have kids, so you know, whatever with that situation. Whereas, you know, like that reference you said, back in the day, it was a whole neighborhood that really raised your family, right? You could go down to so-and-so's house and borrow something, or so-and-so would watch you and you'd watch them. And nowadays it's not like that. Actually, this weekend, Friday, we left early to go down to Santa Cruz to do a martial arts seminar. And so I had to drop my car off at this guy who's going to do some detailing for me. He's a friend. And I dropped my key off in this mailbox and left my phone in the car. So in 2013, man, you can't be without your cell phone, right? So of course I panicked, like, I don't have my cell phone. So I'm trying to get my hand into his mailbox, and his neighbor calls him. He's was like, "Hey, did you know there's a black dude trying to stick his head in your mailbox?" And he was like, "Yeah, I did. He's my friend, and he left his key." And told him the story, right? And so then I talked to him later on. He was like, "That's the only neighbor on my block who we have that kind of communication with.
Yeah.
Who when he goes out of town, I watch his house, and vice versa." He goes, "Other than that, no one else in my neighborhood."
Right.
Like that.
Like how many countless instances you have where you hear like women getting raped in their neighborhood.
Yeah.
People hear it and don't call the police or make no attempt to stop that incident from going down. Like it's crazy.
Well, and it's interesting. I think we're in the era of the no snitch rule in our communities, and I mean that is such an ignorant philosophy.
Yeah.
We're talking about equality in the 1 through 14. The devil keeps us ignorant. The main thing that I can say is that there's a really good take on that. A gentleman by the name of Jeffrey Canada, and one of the things that he said, and there's this whole broadcast about the snitching campaign that took place first on the streets, but then wound up in hip hop, and some of the biggest names in hip hop music during that time period were advocating stop snitching and stop lying and all these types of things. But what Mr. Canada was saying is that the reason why our neighborhoods tend to be so violent and almost lawless is because of the fact that the community, many members of the community have given into this whole philosophy of not saying anything when they see crime and violence taking place in their community. And I think that's one of our responsibilities as fathers of civilization, is that we pull certain people aside, and let's just say you catch someone young doing something, you have to have that conversation with them and show them the difference between being uncivilized and being civilized. It has nothing to do with snitching. If you see someone on your block killing someone that right? We're not saying you walk into the police station with cameras and lights and say, "Hey, I saw this murder." It's like I tell my students, if you see something that is unjust and is criminal in your neighborhood, I mean, you can write a note or a letter and pass that over to someone from the police if you want to. And no one's going to know you did it. And more than that, it would force people to maybe investigate it a little bit more.
Right, because if you ignore it, you're basically condoning it.
No doubt.
What I mean?
True indeed.
No doubt. I think a lot of it has to do with fear, right? A lot of times what'll happen is, let's say you see someone writing on your walls or something like that. You go outside like, "Yo, what are y'all doing?" Da 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 da, and then those people come back, and now you've got like 5 or 6 people that you got to worry about right on your wall and antagonizing you. But again, I think that goes back to the separation, right? So if the men would step up and really be fathers, right, then they would bind together, and then it wouldn't have to come down to a violent altercation, because it'd be like, "Yo, aren't you so and so's son?
Right.
What the hell are you doing, kid? I'm gonna call your father. First, I'm gonna whoop your ass, and I'm gonna take you to your father so he can get his in. What's wrong with you?" And, and those little kids on the block, and those kind of things like that wouldn't be happening. You know what I'm saying? So I think it's really, men just need to step up, and like you mentioned before, it's not about being just a father to your immediate son and family, right? But to other people around you.
True indeed. I think it's really good for us to go into a couple of questions we had in this segment, which is the black deadbeat father reality or a myth, and what are the statistics that support either view? So I just want to kind of put that around. I mean, just based in everyone's research, is the black father the predominant male in the United States that is failing to provide and take care of his children? Or is this a myth that we've been exposed to in America?
From my point of view, I think they're basing that on marriage statistics. So if under the statistics, a black man and black woman aren't married, then the father is considered not fathering being a father to their children.
Right, right. Mm-hmm. Also, if you're not living in the same residence together too,
Right.
they don't consider you being a father to their children. Yeah, so it's a little tricky. I did do some research though, and I did find, I want to say, I don't want to misquote the numbers, but I'll just say a high percentage of black men did actually have their children with them, and they were the primary custodial parent in the relationship. So, you know, the thing with statistics is you can make it say anything you want to.
Right.
Right. So.
Right. And you know, there's also another thing. You know, you have the pitfall of the U.S. Census Bureau statistics. I know Jeru had mentioned to the audience that, you know, you have to be very careful when you look at statistics through the U.S. Census Bureau, primarily because if you look at the Census Bureau's statistics in terms of how many people of African descent were in America, they're inaccurate.
Right.
And part of the reason was because, you know, before the Census Bureau, black people were enslaved in this country. We're talking about people of African descent. And those numbers were written by hand and kept by hand. And at some point they were destroyed. So, you know, keep that in mind.
Kind of like WTC 7 building was destroyed with all that paperwork in it magically.
Right, magically delicious, right? Like some Lucky Charms, whether you eat it up and it's gone, right? So I wanted to put this to the forefront. There is an interesting CNN.com report about one individual who's basically, you know, trying to assume the responsibility of being a father. And in this report, they give a statistic through the 2012 American Community Survey. And this was released by the U.S. Census Bureau. It says that more than 19 million children across the country, 26%, are living without a father in the home. In Baltimore, among African American children, the rate is 69%. Okay, and a word about Baltimore. If you ask anyone who's doing research about Baltimore right now, they will tell you that Baltimore is being depopulated. As far as black and brown men, Baltimore is being depopulated of black and brown fathers because of the incarceration rates. The incarceration rates are extremely high in Baltimore. You know, go ahead, God.
No, I was going to say, you know, you just anyone who's watched The Wire, that's pretty much a clear depiction of what's going down there.
Yes, sir. I was just thinking that too.
And it's funny because there's I can't remember what season of The Wire, but they actually talk about how neighborhoods became hoods. And they talked about how the beat cops used to walk around the neighborhood.
Season 3.
They have conversation with the neighbors in the hood, and you know it was a connection there. Whereas now it's just, you know, it's wild. So
unbelievable.
Yeah. No, just to add on, no doubt in LA, I don't know if y'all out there remember. Police, at least when I was a child, police used to have those LA Dodger cards in the cop cars. Yeah, y'all remember that? So you could be able to walk up to a cop. Anyone in LA, right? Go walk up to an LAPD officer and ask him if he has any LA Dodger cards. And if he doesn't arrest you and beat you, he'll probably say, yeah, we don't have those anymore, but we used to have those.
Now, what were the cards for?
They were just baseball cards. But so they would give them to you, you know. So it was like a community relationship thing. So now you would see the cop and you'd be like, "Oh, that's Officer so and so. He gave me cards. Just go hit him up for some more cards." And so you know the
trust.
So you know you had a report, and then your mom would see you, or your parents would see you talking to an officer, and then they would talk, and so now you've got a community connection. You know who the officer are in your communities. They know who you are, and it's a little different situation. But nowadays.
Everyone's separate.
They're not handing anything but ass whoopings and jail sentences.
Don't forget those bullets.
Right.
Check out the National Fatherhood Initiative. It outlines several different things that fatherhood or the presence of fathers in children's lives undermine. So some of the things that they listed on the National Fatherhood Initiative website was that when a child has a father in their life, and it did not say necessarily living in the home with the mother. It just said that when a male child specifically has a father present in their life who's taking an active role, it's less likely that that child will wind up incarcerated, on drugs, obese. That child is less likely to drop out of school and is more likely to be in a better financial situation than maybe that of his or her parents, and also will attain a higher level of education.
No doubt.
So,
I got a couple to add on to that too. You got girls who don't have their fathers are 2.5 times more likely to get pregnant, and 53% more likely to commit suicide. Boys without fathers in their lives are 63% more likely to run away from home, and 37% more likely to use drugs. Boys and girls without their father are twice likely to drop out of school and twice likely to go to jail.
Now, this is not saying that women aren't doing a great job at parenting by themselves. I think this just speaks to the importance of fatherhood and the father being there. Because as a father, you're really setting the laws for these children so they can get a grasp of how things work before they go out into the world. You know, like we said earlier, the mother wants to be more, making sure that that child is taken care of the way it should be. But the father's like, okay, don't do that. Oh, you're going to still do it? Okay, then there's going to be a repercussion. So then they learn that early so that when they get out into the world, they already have that in their mind. If I do that, this happens, cause and effect. So
right, that's a really good point, because the main thing that I think women definitely need to look into a little bit more is Chris Rock's comments. In one of his stand-ups, he said that there's nothing more powerful than telling a child that I'm going to tell your daddy. All right? So, in saying that, man, I would rather deal with my mother coming up when I got in trouble than having to deal with my father. Because, my father, he never got, had to put his hands on me. But it's just his presence and having that male presence in your life, knowing that, okay, listen, this is the brick wall, and it's not going to go beyond that. And all you have to do as a father is you have to talk to your child.
No doubt.
No doubt. Some of us know this from experience. Actually, all of us know this from experience because we're fathers. And those of you who did not have a father in your life, the reality is there's something within you that is natural and is innate, is complete, when it comes to you dealing with your child and raising your child. And you really should look within to tap into that natural sense of what it means to be a father.
Right. Don't pay attention to the media, and don't pay attention to those who say, oh, it's so difficult raising a child and this and that, because you have all the tools necessary to raise children. Remember, like we built about before, for us to be in existence at this point, that means that we had to have survived heinous things in our history. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
There's so many people, like 99% of the population, that didn't make it. We're the ones who did. So we are equipped with a certain skill set to make sure that life on this planet is preserved. So, you should keep that in mind when you're dealing with your children.
True indeed. It all started from one.
Right.
Right. So, what about this idea of fatherlessness versus anti-fatherhood? I wanted to give that away to Jaquil to open up. So when we're talking about fatherlessness and anti-fatherhood, what does that look like in today's world?
Yeah. So basically, what I was drawing with that is anti-fatherhood. That's the individual, for whatever reason, just doesn't want to be part of the child's life. Right? He's just like, although I did whatever with you, I'm not trying to be part of that. Whereas you have fatherlessness, the father's not necessarily allowed to be in the child's life, right? Whether the woman went to court and she won custody battle, and now she's saying, well, if you don't pay me money for child support, I'm not going to let you see your child, or because you married my best friend from high school, I hate you both now, and so now you're not going to see your babies. Right? Whatever the madness is, that's the father who's in that situation, to where he's like, yo, I really want to be in my father's life, but there's something that's stopping me from being.
Wow. So, I know that I was, thumbing through a lot of the research about that, and that was one of the things that came out in a few, I should say, rather graphic examples of why some men are absent in their children's lives. One of the things that constantly came up was the idea of the court and the woman's whole view in terms of it's either all or nothing. So in that respects, I think one of the things that the statistics do not show when we're talking about deadbeat fathers and also the absent black father is the reality that there are a lot of men out there who are actively trying to assume this role in their child's life, but through court, distance, because that's another thing statistics don't show when they show people who are not active in their child's life, is that sometimes the family where their child, the mother is transient, she's moving a lot, and she's not keeping that connection between she and the father of her children.
Right.
And then we also have to address the fact that some women, when they get into a new relationship, right, with a man, that they also begin to phase out the father of her children. In other words, if this person, and again, I said this at the beginning of the show, that this person that you meet, they may be wealthy in resources, whereas your child's father is not. So what you do is you try to phase out that child's father because he's poor, and this man now has way more wealth. But remember, this man is also inheriting a responsibility that he's not ready for.
Right.
Because just because you have a lot of money, it does not qualify you to be a parent. It just doesn't.
And I think that's important that you stated that, because I know with me, I have a son. He's like a year and a half now, and up until he was born, I was like, damn, what am I gonna do? Like, I was a little bit, because it's an unknown situation. So I was like, okay, will I have the tools necessary to be the father that I need to be? This, that, and the third. As soon as he was born, it was like a switch went on, and you just knew what to do.
Yeah,
you know what I mean. So if you're bringing a child to a father that is not necessarily never had children, never had, or there's no connection to that child as far as that being their actual physical seed, that switch never came on. So it's going to be a lot more difficult for that individual to assume that responsibility.
Right, right. And then I want to add on how you mentioned the financial aspect, right? So just because, and not that that's not important, right? You definitely you need food, clothing, and shelter, right? I mean, it's just basics. But like you guys were building on, that doesn't equip you to be a proper father, right? So instead of spending actual quality time with them and teaching them something, you're just shooting them money and buying them video games and sending him to Magic Mountain or whatever with his friends, and never actually building with them and creating that bond, then that's not being a father either.
I think that's the biggest issue with our communities in this day and time, because that hands-on work isn't really there, based on whether people have to work more now in this day and time because of things being more expensive. That hands-on teaching is not there, but they tried to I guess balance it by dealing in finances. You know what I mean? Well, I'm not able to spend as much time as I like with you, so here, take this, or here's this Game Boy, or here's, you know what I mean? But that's actually making that child worse, because they're not really seeing the reality, and they're not being prepared for the world. So that they go out into the world, they're used to getting these nice things. If they're not getting them from, whether it's another woman, or for females from another man, they're probably coming back to you saying, I need money for this, this, and this.
Right.
So,
Well, that's what they base what love is, right? They're like, oh, you don't love me because you're not giving me stuff like
Right.
my parents did to
Right.
keep me out of your hair.
Right.
Yeah.
And you know, and I think that that's a really great point both of you make in terms of resources. I think that for a lot of black women, we're talking about original women. We live in the money is everything generation. And so you do have those select few fathers who will use that excuse as to why they can't take an active role in their child's life. Well, I don't really have any money. Okay, but walking with your child or having a 20-minute conversation with them is generally free.
Man.
There are still payphones, you know, and I understand your situation, but I mean, if I can tell you how many men on average seem to be able to make it to the club and they're spending money on $5 bottles of water and $8 glasses of whatever the alcohol may be, turn around and say that they can't spend 20 minutes a day having a conversation or, you know, sitting with their child. To me, it's just another excuse.
I can remember an example that's definitely a great point. I remember an example from my perspective. I was probably about 3 or 4 years old, and for me to remember anything from then is ridiculous. But I can't remember what toys I had at 3 or 4. But I remember, we were out playing football or, just roughhousing, me and my brother. And I fell, hurt myself, and I was crying, right? And I can remember trying to reach for, that father figure that was there at the time. And he was like, shake it off. Shake it off, suck it up. And that stuck with me from that point on. Like, meaning I had to stand on my own 2 feet and deal with it and not be so quick to rely on others. You know what I mean?
That's deep.
So this is, 20-something years later, and that sticks with me more than any gift I got, any money that I, attained. So things like that.
I want to go back a little bit. So how do you guys see the interactions between fathers and courts and women and that kind of unholy trinity that we're forced to deal with?
Well, I mean, it was something that was said to me by the God Infinite, Allah, one of our brothers. You've seen him, we'll have him on again.
Yeah.
Peace Infinite. One of the things that he said, just through his research, is that generally courts tend to decide on behalf of women. And then we look at the symbolism behind the court, the blind white woman holding the scales, that justice is blind. And again, I always will argue that, how can justice be blind? I mean, we know that knowledge out of cipher, that's justice. So, I mean, if you didn't see it and you weren't there, how do you know?
If I'm not mistaken, that scale is unbalanced, right?
Have we figured that out yet, man? Is the scale unbalanced or is the scale like this? We need to get into that, huh?
Maybe she's peeking under that blindfold.
Yeah, what is the blindfold made out of? You know what I'm saying? Is it sheer? So I would just say that, if you ask quite a few men out there who are really trying to be fathers, I mean, and again, we can make this a serious research based and give you all these references, but really you should just go out there like we did and just talk to some people who may be struggling with child custody and just seeing their children. And the reality is, as far as the court system is concerned, they tend to make judgments on behalf of the woman. And when you look at how many children, right, and we're going to get into that a little later about the statistics and poverty, but when you get into the reality that there are a lot of original children who are living in poverty with their mothers, there are 2 reasons for that. One of those is that the father's phased out and he's not being allowed to contribute when he wants to. And then the other thing is just, I'll be honest with you, a selfish woman's pride. I'm going to do it myself. F you. The relationship didn't work out, so I don't need you in his life either.
Right. Let's be honest. There's times also where, the men's just like, I made a mistake with her. I don't want her. I don't want the child, and I'm out. But that's not the majority. I think in a lot of people's mind, that's the majority of the
Right.
situation, but that's not the case. I think one thing that's also, like, for example, when you look at Section 8, right? For
Yeah, go there.
You know?
Go there.
For women to get Section 8, a man can't be in the house.
Wait a minute. A man can't be where?
He cannot live in that Section 8 housing.
Right.
But isn't that supposed to be where the family lives?
Where the family lives.
Mm.
But a man cannot be in the house.
Mm.
So to me, a lot of these little laws and a lot of these things that are in place are dealing in separating.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And honestly, I think the court is trying to assume the fatherhood role over these single women's families.
Right, right.
You know
I
what
mean, we talked about in previous shows how black and brown people are being incarcerated at far higher rates than their Caucasian counterparts. Right. So now when you've got in excess of the fathers away from the children, you're going to have some issues there as far as the children's development and all that. And then they're keeping these people locked up, and for a lot of times dumb things. You can go to jail for having to pay child support, not have enough money to pay that child support because she's demanding, or whatever the story is, you just don't have the money to pay that. She then reports you. You go to jail because you didn't pay whatever that was. While you're in jail, you're probably going to lose your job, right? But not only that, you have to pay what you went to jail for, and everything that occurred while you were in jail. But while you were in jail, you didn't have a job. Right. So then you get out and you're set up now to be right back in the same situation. And so it's like if you don't appease her and make her happy, she can pull that card on you.
And I wanted to, it's good that you brought that up in terms of the child support controversy that tends to come up. I found this document. It's the act that was signed into law by President Bill Clinton in 1998, and it's titled the Deadbeat Parents Punishment Act of 1998. So it goes into one of the terms is the offense under the title Failure to Pay Legal Child Support Obligations. Offense, any person who, 1, willfully fails to pay a support obligation with respect to a child who resides in another state, if such obligation has remained unpaid for a period longer than 1 year or is greater than $5,000. 2, travels in interstate or foreign commerce with the intent to evade a support obligation if such obligation has remained unpaid for a period longer than 1 year or is greater than $5,000, or willfully fails to pay a support obligation with respect to a child who resides in another state if such obligation has remained unpaid for a period longer than 2 years or is greater than $10,000. So, I mean...
They're like multiples of 5.
Huh? True indeed. When you look at these types of attacks, and we'll take it there later on in the show, about child support and black men, brown men, and original men in general, because, no one goes unscathed. The idea that we have a law being put into play several years ago that will basically convict a man who may not be able to live up with child support payments decided upon by a court of law. Right. And quite frankly, man, when you look at some of the celebrities out there and some of the child support payments that they're being asked to pay, they're astronomical numbers. Now let's take it to the fact that the average person
per
that
child,
you see,
too.
Per child, plus alimony.
Yeah, my brother, my brother's going through it.
Okay,
I already know.
I used to make the joke, and I don't know if I should say it, but it's a lot cheaper to pay someone in TJ to get rid of your issue than it is to pay in court.
Right.
That's a terrible thing to say, but it's funny. It's just you would think that they would. It's almost like they make you pay for not being with that woman and not being able to please her. So the courts are like, okay, you couldn't control your woman, and you messed up the situation this much where you have to come to us. We are now going to make you pay for your mistake.
Right.
And they charge you for that.
And we have to take into consideration that, historically, black men, and then we have to throw our brown brothers up in the mix as well. We're making up the largest percentage of people who are unemployed in the United States of America. So with that, the court and the system and the government, it's like an octopus. They're all oppressing us in different ways.
Right.
And they're not talking to each other. Well, do you think that's fair? Of course not. So I think more of that is going to come out in the program, the breakdown of how that's affecting us. Why don't we go into the idea of, can a mother fill in the fatherless void? And what things should a mother teach males about fatherhood and when? So I wanted to give that over to the God Jaquil to shed some light on that, on those issues. Yeah,
indeed. So,
I'm sorry, I'm in Jeru.
I was like, was that one of those Magic Johnson things where you're like, I'm gonna look over here and pass it to this dude?
Got the justice and the justice here. Okay, Marcel.
Yeah, part so. Oh yeah, so I think a mother can do her best, but I think there has to be some male interaction. That there needs to be that testosterone. There needs to be a certain level of roughhousing. A young boy specifically needs to know that if I try an individual who is another male, there's going to be a physical repercussion.
Right.
And not that father ever would put hands on that child, but just that knowing of that is the law being in place.
Exactly.
So
yeah, no, that's real. Because I'm thinking my son, he's 12, so he came to that age where he kind of wants to, and I do martial arts and stuff, so I teach him martial arts, so he's always kind of wanting to play, and he tried to punch at me, and I parried, I went to punch him, and he jumped back like, no, that's not fair. And I was like, well, look, kid, let me teach you something. Anytime you try to attack another individual, they're going to try to probably attack you back. So just know that you can't hit someone and expect them not to want to hit you back.
Right. Right. Even if you look at the animal kingdom, you see, say lions, right? There'll be roughhousing between the king or the leader of the pride, between him and the cubs, and at some point the roles change.
Right.
But not until that cub is ready, and he rightfully takes that place by, supplanting the king of the pride. So I think that a lot can be learned from the animal kingdom. You know what I mean? I think we overthink things, but I think, the roughhousing, the laws and the strictness that needs to be in play. I think, not saying that a woman doesn't have the ability to do it, but her nature is to be more of a nurturing and to provide that nurturing energy, which is also essential to the growth and development of that child.
Yeah, you can't just walk around punching your son in the chest.
Right.
Talk about be a man, be a man, be a man. He needs a hug every once in a while.
Right. So that's how I draw it up.
I think my mother's qualities definitely, and they continue to make me question what manhood is. But I can tell you that one of the things that I learned from my mother about fatherhood is that you're a man and that you need to assume your role as a man.
Yes, sir.
And that's the bottom line. And what information followed after that was a stare. Meaning, if you're looking for me to explain what that is, then you're going to be at a loss. You know what I mean? You can, the mother, she acts as a point of reference, and because that's wisdom. And the wisdom is going to tell you straight up where your faults are. Right. Sometimes they may be off a little bit, but they're going to tell you where those faults are. But they're going to tell you what their image of a man is in terms of how a man in their life has improved their life. Now, you have to watch out. There are some of our mothers did not have good experiences with men, which may have been your father. So in that respect, sometimes they give you a distorted image of manhood. You know what I mean? So they can't really dictate to you what that is. Right. So if you're looking for, let's say, a pure example of manhood, it comes from knowledge, just observations, your experiences, but more importantly, like looking deep within. What is it that you want to stand for in life? Does it make sense? You know, some people stand up for all types of stuff. Some of our men, we stand up for getting our faces tattooed all up. And what we fail to look at is that we're going to live longer than we think we're going to live to reap the consequences of disfiguring our faces. You know, that CNN report I mentioned where is focusing on this brother in Baltimore who, you know, was in the dope game. He came out of it, and he went to that particular organization to get help in Baltimore, and they kind of opened some doors for him, got him set up with a job. But one of the things that he has to do is he has to put makeup on his face to cover up the tattoos on his face, which he said he drew on his face while he was in the dope game. Just he wanted people to fear him, and one of the things he attributed to him falling victim into that lifestyle was the fact that his father wasn't present at a very young age. You know, but now he sees his children and he realizes that, hey, I have to assume responsibility for those children.
Yeah.
You know, how you see it? I mean, you know.
Yeah.
Can the mother fill the void, man?
I'll say she can't fill the void of that gap of father, right? Because that's just not her role. Right, you know, 5%. You know, we look at the woman as being the earth and the man as being the sun. So, the earth, although in the center of it, it does have a core that irradiates heat. It's not the sun, right? And it can't perform the duties as the sun.
Great analogy.
Right? And so that's not going to happen. Now, as far as her being able to teach, fatherhood to a kind of degree, I think you were right on point, God, as far as you were saying. She may be able to tell you her general idea of what a man should be, and you have to kind of weigh that for yourself because that may be a little skewed based on what she went through. But she will be able to give you certain things. Like I can say from my personal experience, I didn't grow up with my father in my life. When I was like 4 or 5, they were separate. Right, but my mother did tell me things like, "You're a man and you can't do da 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 da," because that's not what men do. And if you are going to be a man, call yourself a man, then you need to do da 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 da, because that's what men do. Now, as far as having, you know, earlier I talked about how the father also means prototype, right? So as far as having that physical example there of seeing someone, you know, like I said, the father and the son are on the cliff, and the father jumps into the lake. And he's like, and comes back up. He's like, okay, son.
Understand it.
Yeah. Now I can say, okay, that's how he jumped and that's how he did it. That's the area he landed in. Okay, here I go. I jump off the cliff. Right. But when it's just you up on the cliff, and you know you got that voice in the background. Well, a father should da 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 da, and you're like, you're saying that from over there, but you're not looking at this cliff. That's really far down. Right. And so you know you don't have that physical example of someone walking you through it, so you kind of gotta, like you said, do the knowledge for yourself and kind of make moves. So it's a little difficult, I guess, in that situation, but it's definitely not impossible. If anything, I would say try and, you know, strive to get with other positive male influences. Find an uncle, find someone else's father.
True indeed.
You know what I mean?
True indeed. And if you find that person that you look up to making a mistake, you know, judge the degree of that mistake. You know, because sometimes I think that's where a lot of our youths are at. Whereas they begin looking up to a person, and then he sees that male role model make a mistake, and then all of a sudden it's just like, oh man, you know, you're not perfect. We're not perfect. You know what I mean? We strive for perfection. Like one of my brothers freed himself, born Allah in Morocco. He told me that we are perfectly imperfect, God, and that's that was one of the most golden statements I heard.
Well, here's one for you. You was like those Wu-Tang clips I threw out.
Yeah.
They said every time you take a step, you're striving for perfection. Right. And so that to me that means that you're not gonna be perfect, right? But you always take those steps to try to obtain that perfection.
Yeah, and we consciously do that. You know, we consciously do that, and we're unfortunately. Sometimes we're called on that, meaning when we make a mistake, sometimes the women in our lives will amplify that You know, and be like, well,
neon lights.
yeah,
Mistake,
right.
mistake.
You're not supposed to make that mistake.
Right.
Well, when did I ever tell you that I wasn't going to make a mistake?
Right. I think that's essential when you're dealing with children, that you own up to your mistakes.
Yeah, you got to have that dialogue.
Yeah, listen, oh yeah, I should have did this. My mathematics were off, this, that, and the third. Let them know that you acknowledge that mistake instead of saying, okay, well, whatever, make excuses or just trying to kind of deflect some of that, because then you're going to lose respect automatically.
Right,
you know what I mean?
right. Mm-hmm. Or you're going to set that skewed example for that kid, right? So he's either going to, look at that and be like, oh, well, it's okay if I do it because he did it.
Mm-hmm.
Or he may get turned off to you being that father figure role model for him in general.
Mm-hmm.
And now he's going to go look towards other influences.
Mm-hmm.
Who knows where that'll lead him.
Mm-hmm. Right. I think also when you look at women raising children, generally women, when things get tough, they get more emotional. Mm-hmm. So as men or as boys, young boys growing up in that environment, that's what they're observing as the way to deal with stress or deal with certain different things.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So that's going to cause them to be more emotional. Mm-hmm. Not saying that men don't have emotion, but I don't think men should be emotional.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because the end of it, you see all, meaning that your emotion shouldn't succumb you to the point where it dictates your actions and thoughts and things of that nature.
Right.
Mm-hmm. I think one great thing that single mother could do is get their child involved in some kind of either martial arts, sports, or something like that, where they're around older men, and not only that, they get to see cause and effect. If I'm late for practice, I'm gonna get punished for that.
Right.
Or if in the game and I make a mistake that I shouldn't have, there's an instant repercussion to that mistake.
Uh-huh.
And then those are laws that stay with you, throughout your life.
For sure.
You know what I mean?
For
like
sure.
I always say, football was my first 120.
Mm.
You know what I mean? I learned a lot of, knowledge and wisdom that I'd use in this day and time from sports and football. You know what I mean?
Sure.
So
sure. No, I think that's a great thing. Even just being around other kids your age, you know what I'm saying, who can relate to you, right? And then you can build with them too. Because it's one thing to have that mother and father that you can go to, but it's also another thing where if you can get other kids who have a good mother-father situation, that you two can kind of talk about things for, and you know what I mean, the camaraderie of just speaking amongst your peers.
Deep. True indeed. Well, I like to go ahead and take a break, and when we return, we're going to talk about some of the obstacles that are preventing black men from being fathers to the children in the United States, but more importantly, what put these obstacles in place. So I'm going to say peace, and we'll be seeing you back in a couple of minutes.
Peace.
Peace.
So.
Peace. Welcome back to the Knowledge of Self radio show. My name is Touré Allah.
Peace. Jakil Naj Allah.
Peace, Jarullah.
And before we left, we talked a little bit about, some perspectives in terms of fatherhood and in terms of whether or not a mother can fill the void of a father not being present in a child's life. So we all agree that there are several things that are necessary in terms of raising children, and how the male presence is very important in the child's life, whether the child be male or female.
Mm-hmm.
So I wanted to give it away to Jarul to open up this segment in terms of the way that some of the obstacles that are preventing black fathers from playing an active role in their children's lives or child life, way before many of us were here, if not all of us in modern times, in terms of the systematic things that were put in place to create a system that actually is preventing us from being active participants in our family and everything else related to our absence in the lives of some of our children.
Yeah.
So I wanted to give it to Jarul so he can give a really interesting perspective on that before we actually go into the discussion. Peace.
Yeah, peace. So, when you look at enslavement or slavery, for it to function as a business, you have to first, we're going to have to take it to science. You first and foremost have to make the individuals that are so-called slaves, you have to take them to an unnatural state of mind. So if for hundreds, millions of years on the planet, you've developed a system where you have a mother, a father who come together, have a child. Father is the dominant force. The mother is more of the feminine force. That has been the foundation. But if I'm going to be successful in making an individual do what I want them to do, I have to break that. I have to change that trend. So, people can argue about the Willie Lynch letter to say, well, he never really wrote it, this, that, and the third, he never existed, he's a boogeyman, whatever, right? But the science of the letter, you can't deny that. The stuff actually went down. So I'm gonna just read a little bit of a segment from it that I think is pertinent to what we're building on. So we have reversed the relationship in her natural uncivilized state. She would have a strong dependency on the uncivilized, I'll just say male, and she would have a limited protective tendency toward her independent male offspring, and would raise male offsprings to be dependent like her. Nature had provided for this type of balance. We reverse nature by burning and pulling a uncivilized black man apart and bullwhipping the other to the point of death, all in her presence. By her being left alone unprotected, with the male image destroyed, the ordeal caused her to move for her psychologically dependent state to a frozen independent state. In this frozen psychological state of independence, she will raise her male and female offspring in reverse roles. For fear of the young male's life, she will psychologically train him to be mentally weak and dependent, and but physically strong.
Wow.
So I think if you look at a lot of what you see in this day and time as relates to black men, you can see how this right here, just this snippet, if you read the whole thing, there's much more in it, but just this snippet is, seen in this day and time. Women tend to keep their boys close. They don't want them to get too far from them, and they're a little bit hesitant in letting them, get out there and experiment with life and hurt themselves, and
jump off a tent stairs,
right.
Fall and do it again.
Right.
Peace myself.
So.
Indeed. I think that's a really good way to sort of spin this next segment. The Willie Lynch letter, and like I said, among other things, we draw value as a collective from anything that has some particular science in it, even if it's a cartoon. We know a cartoon's not real.
We're gonna do a show on that at some point.
But they all teach lessons, right?
Man,
I mean, what was the cartoon? It was called Bebe's Kids. I mean, as far as the controversial nature of that, I didn't hear too many people walking out and saying, we really don't like being depicted that way.
Right.
Those of us who are scientists of life, we do like to use those things to build a little bit of a knowledgeable or knowledge-based foundation. So our discussion is about how did the history of enslavement change our view of fatherhood and parenting in America. Go ahead.
No, I just wanted to state, like, when you look at that Bebe's Kids, why are those kids so bad? Because the father wasn't there.
Exactly.
Right. But then going back to that letter, right? It said that this ordeal will cause her to move from her psychologically dependent state to a frozen, meaning like it's separate from everything else, independent state. And then because of that, she'll teach her kids opposite, right? I just think that's interesting how when you isolate her like that, she becomes it said frozen, so you're like stuck in fear and you don't really know how to move. But then it said she's independent, but she switched from her more dominant state, right? So you have her being other than her own self at a weaker role, right? And she's frozen and idolized from who she really is.
Yeah, it's deep, man. This letter, man.
Really good point, man. And we could actually do some plus builds on that too. Take some pieces of it and give it to you. True indeed. Thanks for that, God. So I wanted to begin with the idea of the what's known as post-traumatic slave syndrome. And one of the things we would encourage all of you to see or go out and view, it's kind of hard to get, but there's a movie called Sankofa out there, which is an independent film. And I mean, when I saw Sankofa, it was at the Pan-African Film Festival at the Magic Johnson Theater, or maybe the formerly known, it's still called the Magic Johnson Theater. Last time I checked.
What, right over here?
Right, it's still called Magic Johnson Theater? Or
Nah, something else.
Right, so formerly the Magic Johnson Theater at Baldwin Hills Crenshaw Plaza. It was a movie about a young lady who actually travels to Africa, and she walks through one of the slave, passageways in Senegal, which was like a major route where, or port, where people who were captured were sent away to the New World.
Trading post.
Thank you. It's a trading post. And in saying that, over the course of this story, she goes through these flashbacks where actually she's living as a person who is enslaved. So even though she's experiencing this tour in modern times, she still continues to flash back. And within those flashbacks are all of these traumatic experiences that an enslaved black woman went through.
Wow.
So one of the things that people tend to forget is that where wealth is transferred through one family, and knowledge is transferred, and a lot of other things are transferred through a family historically, and it remains to be seen today, right, as far as wealth and history, because it's true, man. I mean, a lot of families that you see that are wealthy today, it was passed down over
wealthy before too.
Years. Right. So now, one of the things that people fail to recognize is that a people's experience is also passed down, whether it be traumatic or positive. So the whole idea of post-traumatic slave syndrome, I mean, when it first was introduced, some of the scholars out there were kind of like, what? Slavery was over. It's been over hundreds of years. Like, how can you say that slavery, your family members were enslaved? How does that affect you today? But that's the thing that we wanted to address. We're talking about a system that was put in place, and the modern day obstacles that still exist are actually remnants of how slave societies were run. So I think one of the things I wanted to share with you was the idea of as written in John Hope Franklin's text, this idea of slave rearing. Okay, and slave rearing, as he defines it, it was this idea where slave masters or plantation owners, they actively, deliberately, and consciously um, demanded that the enslaved women on their plantations had a certain amount of children. So I know one of the things that was written in From Slavery to Freedom by John Hope Franklin is that in most cases, one woman had mothered anywhere from 13 to 15 children.
Wow.
Okay, and within that phase, those children were then, of course, sold off to different plantations.
Yeah.
There were some states or some plantation owners which purchased whole families, but the highest price was paid for enslaved people who were sold individually. Now, consider that in terms of how that worked on our great 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 grandmothers and grandfathers, and what message that sent to them in terms of the idea of family. So, how do you all think? I mean, because we're all well versed in terms of studying, enslavement and how that's affected us now. How do you think that practice of slave breeding led to the almost deterioration of our families in that early point of America?
No, I think it's right there in that letter. She will
Yeah.
she will raise her male and female offspring in reverse roles, right? And so you've got I mean, that's just it. You got them being raised in reverse roles. She like the God said, she keeps her son enclosed. Which I was watching this lecture given by Dr. Umar Johnson, and he was like, "Women, you have to stop keeping your women so far underneath your skirt because they might start wanting to wear one." And so
the young boys, right? Keeping the young boys close, yeah.
Yeah, and so I just with that, what happened in the slave thing where you sold one kid over here and one over there, and then you don't have that father type figure access. It sets up that role to where you try the woman to try to protect her child, right? She keeps him strong, but then she tells him that you're not so intelligent because that was a protective mechanism. So it's like, no, don't take my child. He's not smart. He's just dumb. He's just really strong. Keep him here with me. And so it sets the stage for a lot of different things. One, then the child begins to be belittled, right? In the sense that, well, damn, my mom was always telling this dude that, I'm not this and I'm not that, right? And I'm only good for just strong manual labor stuff. And so, I think it just sets the stage for a lot of things on down the line, like we were talking about.
And that's why you see general, in our communities, the only way people generally see is the way to get out would be physically how they look, sports, what they can do on these, football, basketball, these sporting fields. Because that's all they see their worth as, based on what's been taught from generation to generation to this time.
Yeah, physically, like all you have to do is be physically capable of performing
a task.
A task. Sometimes in this day and time, a task that doesn't require much thinking, other than you being able to follow instructions. So that's a very important point because the whole idea of slave breeding was to make sure that one type of black man or black woman was produced in America. Because you're talking about, if you talk about 15 children in a generation, and you just say, let's say some of those children lived until they were 75 or 80 or 90 years old, you have to think about the time that follows when those people have children and what their mentality was and what they taught their children. Many of your quote-unquote great-grandparents were those people who came out of that slave breeding mentality, which is why sometimes, like when we study our people and we look at what's known as the pathology or the mentality of our people, we can't quite finger, like, where is that type of thinking coming from, where it's just like, yo, I know better than to let my child do A, B, C, and D. But he doesn't seem to think that way.
Mm-hmm.
Part of that is because, just like I said earlier, wealth is passed down, intelligence and education is passed down, and so is ignorance.
Mm-hmm.
Like all those things are passed down.
Mm-hmm.
So now in terms of the obstacles that we encounter today, what are some of the things that all of you have researched or just observed in your life are some of the reasons as to why black men um, have really had difficult times being the types of fathers that they want to be in this life and in this country? What are some of the obstacles that prevent us from being like true fathers and things of that nature?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, I think it's the relation with the mother.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the mom makes it very difficult for him to stand up and be who he needs to be because she's always trying to dictate to him who he should be.
Right.
Okay, you're not providing me with this, you're not doing this, you're not doing that. As opposed to realizing that him being there, showing that child those necessary tools that child needs to be great when he's on his own is way more valuable than anything monetarily.
Yeah,
You know what I mean?
yeah, no doubt. To add on, I would say if, because and we talked about that on the previous show, to where a lot of times the black woman is making more money than the black male.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so that doesn't mean that he ceases to be the black man,
Mm-hmm.
right? He's not the son anymore.
Mm-hmm.
That just means that now you as a woman are in a position to where you now have to provide financially like that, but now he can do other things, right? Now maybe he has to take the kids to school in the morning, or you know what I'm saying. And that's not like a woman thing to do.
That's important to state,
right?
Yeah.
It's just a matter of, okay, we have a job to do. Who's best qualified to do this job? Okay, if you're the one who's better qualified for whatever reason to bring the money in the house, then cool.
Mm-hmm.
You do that to the best of your ability, and that's my job as the man to dictate who, right, is better at what than here. So I'm not gonna try to out money you, and that doesn't mean that I'm not a man, and that now that you're a man because you make a lot of money. You just happen to be the one who's making more money.
Right. Spoken by true fathers. I mean, the whole idea is that I think when we are teaching the women in our lives the correct way, one of the things that we need to teach is that when one has more than one another, that doesn't transfer into this idea of he's dependent on me or she's dependent on me.
Right.
Because sometimes because I'm the breadwinner in my household, if I don't check myself, I can get caught up in that type of thinking to where it's like, she's dependent on me. No,
Right.
what it is that we are dependent
On each other,
on one another, and we are moving as an interdependent organism, which is going to build something greater. Because again, as it was stated at the beginning of the program, we're all interested, all the gods and the earth, we're interested in building a legacy in our family. Something that when we're long gone, our children will pick up and transfer that energy and make it into something to meet modern times. Somewhere in our DNA and our genetic strand, I'm pretty sure there was someone in our family that was doing just this, speaking to people and trying to educate them. You know what I mean? So one of the things I wanted to throw out there into this discussion is, how do you all think welfare, because it was stated earlier, how do you think welfare is being used as a tool to divide men from their families? And how is that looking in modern times from everyone's experience or research?
One of the things he hit on was just that the Section 8 issue, right? To where, you get a place to stay, now you can put your kid there, but you can't have your man there. And then oftentimes, if he comes over, then you got neighbors who are snitching on you.
And that goes into the point earlier we built about the neighborhoods, because those types of things are divisive and they start to divide people because it's the neighbors against, that black man sneaking through the window, and so you're snitching, and then that goes into the whole snitching thing, and it's just, it's just a crazy revolving cycle of madness,
Yeah. Also,
Yeah.
I would even say as far as getting some social services, right? So um, if they find out that there's two incomes in the house, they're less likely to try to provide some kind of aid for you, right? So then now the woman's got to go through the whole song and dance of trying to, I don't want to use the word lie. Not that they don't lie, but but she's got to withhold certain informations and stuff on that to try to get some kind of social aid, and then maybe now that allows that she has those services. She's now under certain rules and regulations, right? Sometimes that means that people come to your house to check on who's there. So you're hanging out, trying to be with your kid, and then you get a social services person just randomly coming to check in, and you're like, hold on.
True indeed. So, and one of the things that, because again, we build on experiences and what we've heard. I know that one of my other mother figures in life, her name is Betty, my father's wife. She actually grew up in the city of Chicago. And one of the things she said was that, when she was a child, she was actually there when welfare services were enacted in the United States. And made available to people. And she says, it was almost like it was overnight, where at one point in time there were several households in her neighborhood where it was a man, a husband living in the household with his wife and his children. But as soon as welfare was made available, at least in her community, all of a sudden, a lot of those households miraculously didn't have any men living in them. Because of what you two just stated, that the guidelines or the rules and regulations of welfare says that you can't have two incomes in a household, that being of a man, or you will lose your benefits. Couple that with another obstacle, whereas again, black men make up one of the largest percentages of people who are unemployed. And when I'm talking about black men, I'm referring to black and brown men specifically. As far as yellow seeds, that's a different spin on everything. If you look at the population of people referred to as Cambodians in the United States, not only are Cambodians or the Khmer people coming from one of the poorest countries in Southeast Asia, but they happen to be one of the poorest, quote-unquote, Asian groups in the United States, being in Rhode Island and Long Beach. So those statistics are out there, and we're not going unscathed. So, but in saying that, I think there are definitely some other things I know that are preventing that true father role. I wanted Jaquil to hit us with the idea of hypermasculinity and its causes, in terms of that being one of the obstacles today that we face as fathers.
Yeah. So hypermasculinity is actually, it's I'll define it as when a young man, or for that matter, a boy, is not sure of himself, and he is trying to therefore prove his manhood to not only himself but to you also, right? And so then that's where you kind of get the gangster culture from, right? Because now this dude needs to prove how tough he is, or how bad he is, how much of a man he is by doing X, Y, and Z. When kind of we built about that earlier, when those aren't the real tenets of what a man's supposed to be anyway. So again, this young man is growing up, or this boy who's trying to become a man, he's now growing up with this skewed vision, or thought of what it is to be a man, i.e., shag my pants, put the rag in the pocket, or be on the block and sell some drugs. They make the excuse, right? Well, I got to provide for my family. Okay, well, your mother should have told you that a real man works honest jobs and works hard, honestly, to provide for his family, not take shortcuts and risk his freedom. Right? Because what good are you now when you get locked up in jail? Because that's what's going to happen, right? Or when you get shot because some other dude wants your spot. So I think and that's what happened masculine, and then just the causes of that, kind of this we talked about, just the man not being there, and then the woman having a skewed idea or vision of what it is to be a man or what manhood is all about.
Mm-hmm. And you know, I'm glad you mentioned that in terms of hypermasculinity, because the idea that it's money that's the motivation for a lot of these brothers out here that are doing these types of things. In all honesty, all of us come from some sort of experience dealing with that fast life, trying to make fast money. And the idea is, even though you may be providing your child with the latest $200 tennis shoes and, you know, Ralph Lauren clothing for a 9-month-old baby, I mean, you may be successful at getting all of those things, but again, those things are material items. That doesn't mean you're taking care of your child.
Right. It doesn't make you more of a man or more of a father just because you have, you know, millions of dollars and things of that nature. It's what you're doing, you know, what you do day to day, the lessons you're teaching that seed, you know.
True indeed.
Yeah.
I want you to add on, God, in terms of the hyper masculinity.
Well, it's interesting because that hyper you can put in front of a lot of things. You know, like you got individuals who might have grew up in like more of a rural environment and more of a country type of environment that are black or original people. Think that to be black, they have to act a certain way, so they tend to go overboard with the way that they talk and the way that they act, and you know, what are these young kids saying? The ratchetness, is that the word that they use?
Ratchet.
You know, they have to do all these types of things to feel like they are who they say they are. You know, and this comes back to the name of this show, Knowledge of Self Radio. You got to know yourself. If you know yourself, which I think the father is the one who's sharing that equality in the beginning. If you grow up knowing yourself, then all this hyper anything is not going to really be an issue for you.
Right.
You know what I mean? You'll be balanced. You won't need to be hyper. You know.
Right. And I mean, to piggyback on what you both said, I mean, when our children know who they are and they see this hyper masculinity in terms of the thug image and the gangster image, they'll just look at it like a form of entertainment.
Right.
It's like, wow, you're for real, aren't you? It's kind of like you're a cartoon character.
Right.
You know, because again, you know, I've stated it before, you know, as far as the gods and the earths are concerned, we're not a gang, but more importantly, we don't care that you're in a gang. You know, we don't care about that. We're here to build families and we're here to educate people. And when you enter into this mindset, that's something that you realize you have to do. We're trying to make gods and earths out of pimps and hoes or gangsters and deadbeats or whatever terms you want to use for people that are basically falling under one umbrella, lost. You know, because I think when they brought the first arrivals to the United States in 1608, you know, they were civilized when they stole them. And then we entered into this mind state of uncivilization when we came to the United States, and we spent our time around the Caucasian, who fed us all types of poison animals, had us living in rags. And basically, I mean, you know, we could go real deep in terms of looking at some of the garments that the field workers were given. They were just basically rags, which is the equivalent of what the Caucasian was wearing in the caves of the Caucasus Mountains. You know, them being uncivilized and living like savages. So those of you out there who think it's just about, you know, money and, you know, you think it's about this, I'm going to put hypersexual activity that goes on in our communities, man, where disease is rampant and we're walking around with problems, man, and sicknesses and germs. And we're just saying that, well, you know, I'm just going to live this life the way I want to live it, and I don't care.
YOLO.
Yeah, YOLO. You know what I'm thinking? YOLO. God, I heard that the other day. So it's like, you're YOLO and all that type of stuff. It's like, man, you know, remember that you're living out a mentality that was branded in your mind from a person who not only did not care about your forefathers and mothers, but quite frankly, in modern times, he doesn't care about you today.
Right.
Because as long as we live in that way, we're never gonna get what we're supposed to get in this life.
And and definitely remember that you really don't only live once. You know what I mean? Because when you die, the repercussions of what you did when you were here are still withstanding.
Yeah.
Oh
You
yeah.
know, your children, their children, so on and so forth are always going to be. You know what I mean? So I think
Crooked Eye, it's got a song. I don't know if it's his new album or not, but I just recently heard it. And instead of YOLO, it's called, the name of the song is called Yo Do. You only die once. And I think when you change the "you only live once" to "you only die once," it paints a different perspective on your life and how you should live it, right? So if you're thinking, I'm only going to die one time, then there's all this stuff that I need to make sure that is right before I die, right? Because nothing else is going to happen after that, right? I'm only going to die once, and after that, so I need to make sure things are in order. If you're talking about being a man and being raised up into a man, right, you realize that, okay, yeah, I do have a prototype that I'm following, but eventually I will be that prototype. Right? And so now I need to have things in order so that when I'm not that prototype, like you talked about the Animal Planet.
Animal Kingdom.
Animal Kingdom, that's a show.
Yeah.
In the Animal Kingdom, the lion, he wrestles around with the other lions, and he's like, yeah, rah, I'm the big lion. I dominate you. And then one day, he's like, rah, 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 rah. Oh, man, I'm not the big lion anymore. Go ahead and do your thing, right? Yeah. But he prepared him for that moment that whole time through. Every time he was like, rah, rah, got you, I'm the big lion. That dude was like, damn, I'm not the big lion yet. But now I've learned something else I need to do now. And then, right? And then eventually he's like, rah, rah, I got you. He's like, okay, cool. Now I've learned everything that I need to learn. I've got to take that,
add on to it,
and then give that to the next one.
You know,
Indeed.
But I also had some interesting things that I picked up. Suicide attempts amongst black men have gone up like 800% since 1980.
Wow.
Yeah, and so one of the things that you can look to that happened in 1980 is the mass incarceration of the black man, right? So now you've got children growing up, daughters and sons growing up without their father in their life.
And then their mom's hooked on drugs.
Man, it sets the stage for those kind of things.
And then you have media, because when you said that, what comes to mind is you look at all the music that has come out since 1980. But more importantly, I mean, all of us can remember a picture of Dr. Dre holding a 38 up to his temple. I think that was one of the covers of Source magazine. Biggie Smalls, I can't remember the name of that song. Maybe y'all can help me.
I know what you're talking about. Yeah. You're talking about killing himself.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And at the end of
Suicidal Thoughts.
He does kill himself.
Yeah,
Thank you. Suicidal Thoughts, Notorious B.I.G., The Game, among other things, him taking a picture of him holding 245s up at his temples.
Okay.
You know what I mean? On a cover of a major rap publication.
Weezy, your boy Weezy's got a video where he's got the gun to his head. And he's talking about, man, I'm not really a Lil Wayne fan, so but I saw the video.
Syrup or something.
Yeah, something like that. And he's talking about how it's pretty much better off to kill yourself in the image. So in the video, he's got a gun to his head, and then they flash away, the trigger blows, and then you see red, it's supposed to be blood, flash on the screen, as if he really had killed himself.
Right, you see, and that's a really healthy diagnosis, so to speak, of the mentality of our people. You know what I mean? Whether people like Lil Wayne or anyone else wants to admit it, you're actually a part of this as well. And we're encouraging all of you to really look at your message and keep in mind that a lot of those people that are buying your hip-hop albums in the beginning of your career, they're actually young original people, specifically males.
Yeah.
So now when you become a big star and do a song with, I don't know, Limp Bizkit or whatever white group you want to do it with, then you become beloved and embraced by a larger community of Caucasian adolescents. But even still, you're still responsible for the lives of those Caucasian adolescents who are listening to your music, because you're supposed to be the father of civilization.
Yeah.
But also you're responsible for the lives of those who are original people, original youth, seeds and soils in our culture.
Mm-hmm.
So, in saying that, why don't we go ahead and take a break and come right back at you with how religion affects fatherhood.
Peace.
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 Peace. Welcome back to the Nod Yourself Radio Show. My name is Teray Allah.
Peace. Jakil Naj Allah.
Peace, Jarullah.
And for this segment, we're going to talk briefly about religion and its effects on fatherhood. And more importantly, we're going to talk about the useful solutions to being a good father. So I wanted to give this over to Jarul in terms of the whole idea of how religion undermines, a lot of men's responsibility as fathers and how that plays into impeding us from delivering exactly what we're supposed to deliver as fathers. So give it away to Jarul. Peace.
Yeah, I mean, I just see it as, if the mystery God in the sky is our Father, right? And then that means that you're at a place where you'll never reach the highest level of anything because that Father in the sky that's unseen, that you can't prove, taste, hear, smell, touch, or anything of that nature, it's there, then that means your level of achievement is only going to be at a certain level. And once you get to that level, you're going to be content there because you say, well, this mystery father has my best interests at heart.
Right.
You know what I mean? So it keeps you in a more of a docile and restricted state. And then your accountability for certain actions and things of that nature, you tend to pass off on a mystery God instead of you owning up and taking responsibility. So how are you supposed to teach your children to own up and take responsibility if you're putting all of that on a mystery God?
No doubt.
That's deep.
No doubt. Yeah, it's the equivalent of saying, I can run, 440 quicker than you, and they're like, okay, well, what's your time? well, I can run quicker than you. And you're like, okay, well, what's your time? And I'm like, well, you just start running, and then I'll let you know if you beat my time.
Right.
Right. And it's the same thing as far as having a mystery God is that being your overall father. You've got a standard, right? Because you mentioned father is prototype, but you got a prototype which you've never seen do anything.
Right. Right.
And you don't know anyone who's ever seen this thing do anything. So what steps do you have to follow?
Right.
And then, as you mentioned, as far as psychological, if you know that you're supposed to, every son and daughter, or I'd say more important, every son wants to grow up to be like his father, right? In some aspect. So, how do you grow up to be like something that you don't know what it is?
Right.
And you can't define it.
Right, that's a really great point. You know,
go ahead.
Go ahead. No,
I was
just
saying
saying that's a good point.
And then it sets you up like the God said to fall short. Now, so let's think about this. If let's say you have an attainable goal, right? Doing 5 pull-ups, right, or running a mile. Your goal is to run a mile, and you can do like half a mile, or maybe 3/4 of a mile, but you never get to that mile. Eventually, you're just gonna stop running the mile. Because you're like, well, damn, I always fall short of this goal. I can never quite make this goal. Or damn, maybe I just suck and I'm a pathetic person. Right? And so the same thing, you have this mystery father who's so far up here, and you can never. He's up here. You can never even reach the ceiling of where he's at. So what does that tell you? Then obviously you're a terrible person, and you must suck at life because you can never reach. You're going to tell yourself that because you can never reach that level of what it is to be that thing that you look up to obtain to be.
And think about it when you become, like, for example, if you're the head of anything, if you're the man, right? You being on point day to day is going to be more rooted in you than as opposed to if you're below a situation that you'll never ever reach.
Right.
Like once you become, say, the manager at a job, you'll probably be more apt to be on point with what you do day to day on that job, as far as how your workers see you. You know, some of the interactions that you might have had with them outside of work probably change. You know, because you want them to view you a certain way.
Yeah.
So the same holds true to this mystery God. When there's no example for you to really do the knowledge to, you're falling short because you're basing things on what a book says, and you're basing it on what another individual says. Is this thing is so infinitely powerful and prominent, and you're looking at yourself, well, I don't feel that powerful and prominent. And you're not really seeing the power and prominence of yourself, and you never really will because you're trying to see it in something that's unseen. And you're going to be searching and searching and searching, right? And you'll never find it.
Right.
So
that's deep.
Yeah.
You know, the other thing is just kind of like one of our brothers, Understanding God, told me a couple of years ago. And he said one of the things that he explained to his children is that, you know, when food is on the table, he always explains to them or asks them, you know, well, how did that food get on the table? And, you know, the answer is always, well, you know, Dad provided it, or Dad went to work and maybe Mom took the money and bought the food, she cooked it, and then she put it on the table. So, you know, when you look at that transference of
that's
energy,
powerful, man.
it's nothing that comes from an unknown source.
Yeah.
We just told you the transference of energy in terms of what provides things for men, women, and children. And in all of my days, even when, you know, I was exposed to the Christian holidays and got these gifts, even though my mother may have played and written from Santa, I mean, come on, man. I knew it wasn't from Santa. I knew it was from my mother.
Right.
Because I had asked her for the toy that she wrapped in the paper, you know, several months prior to Christmas. So, again, the transference of energy is not from an unknown source. You know, you find the source every single time. There was one of the things we wanted to share with you briefly, which was in terms of some of the things that come out of the major books, the Quran and the Holy Bible. And one of the things you can look at is in chapter 12, 2 Corinthians chapter 12, verse, pardon self. Had it, but now my finger must have slipped. Verse 14. And this is in reference in as far as who is supposed to provide for children. And it says, 2 Corinthians chapter 12, verse 14. Behold, the third time I am ready to come to you, and I will not be burdensome to you, for I seek not yours, but you. For the children ought not to lay up for the parents, but the parents for the children. So again, that's something really important. Those of you who are in the church or you study Christianity, it's really important that if you are going to teach this philosophy or religion to your children, make sure you also absorb that and pass it on to others as far as the importance of, being a father, since we're talking about fatherhood today, how important it is for a father to provide whatever he can to his children, even if it's not in the form of paper money. I know in the Quran, if you read the book, it's titled Al-Baqarah, which translates into the cow. There is a portion in there that talks about the people who believe in the Quran and the Gib, how they'll spend out on their parents, their children, their wives, and then themselves. So if you look at that order of things, if you're a Muslim, you also know the importance of taking care of your children. So I know, Jakil, you wanted to add something on in terms of the idea of the teachings, man, that should be passed on to people in terms of teaching their children.
Yeah. Oh, so for sure. I actually had something else, but yeah, I'll say as far as the teaching of your children, just take some time and spend some time with your kids, right? Like the guy was saying, it's not a money thing. It's really just a time thing. Like, I've got 2 kids, and more than anything else, they just want to, whatever it is that I'm doing, they just want to do it with me. Or if my daughter's playing with her toys, I don't have to take her anywhere. She just wants me to play Barbie toys with her too, right? And that's the best thing for her, right? Even if it's 5 minutes, 10 minutes, it's not like it's got to be a all day event. They just want to have some time, and so I'd say that's the best thing you can do. If you could work it out to where you can maybe bring your kids with you to work one day to kind of show them how you get down, or even when they get a little older. My son's 12, like I mentioned now, so I don't take him with me all the time when I go out with the guys, but there's times, depending where we're going, I'll take him out to hang out with some of my friends just so he could see what a father does. You know what I'm saying? When he's not at home. How is a man supposed to act at home and abroad? Right? Because again, I'm that prototype for him to follow. So if he doesn't see how I'm acting when I'm outside, he's not going to know how to act when he's outside. Set that example for your children.
True indeed. That's a great point. And I like the fact that you mentioned that it doesn't have to be a whole bunch of time. I mean, I have a 6-year-old, so he's been a father longer than I have. And in the beginning, I used to think like, wow, I don't really have an hour or 2 hours to spend with my son. But it's good that you said that the value of spending 5, 10, 15, 20 minutes with your child, I mean, it's enormous to that child.
For sure. I mean, you got how many commercials do you get in an hour TV show? Right? So commercials are 2 minutes and 20 seconds. So that's roughly like 10, 15 minutes or something of commercials, maybe. Right? So every commercial break, or for people who you TiVo, right? Take out 15 minutes of that TV show that you're going to watch and spend that with your children.
True indeed.
And then go watch a TV show.
That's a great point. So what are the teachings that motivate black men to be true fathers? That was the one thing I wanted to hear from Jerul in terms of that nature.
I can only speak for what worked for me. I always knew, because, my father wasn't around when I was little, but I always knew, like, when I had children, I was going to be there. But I never really had a curriculum or a foundation that would...
prototype or something.
Exactly. So, obviously, what I learned through sports helps me to be who I am, but I didn't really have that real minute day-to-day mathematics that I needed to,
Right.
make sure that first and foremost that I was on point, so that when I carry the way that I carry myself, they'll see it and they'll say, okay, well, this is the right and exact way to get down. So for me, it was the 5% teachings. I'm not trying to be out here on some Jehovah's Witness type stuff, but I can only build about what worked for me.
Yeah.
You can like, for example, Buddhism. They have a pretty practical approach to parenting and fatherhood. So there's different venues out there, but I think anything that teaches you about yourself first and foremost, about you taking responsibility for your actions, that's a good place to start. And anything that teaches you about things that you'll never really be able to see or prove or anything like that, it's outside of the realm of 360. Leave it alone, So yeah, that's what I would say.
That's deep.
Yeah.
That's deep. Aside that, are there any spiritual teachings that that you would suggest, Jaquil, in terms of what could be passed on to children? Because much of what we deal with, children can't really understand it. At least until they're teenagers, they can't begin to fathom what we're talking about. So, what would be some of the things that you would impart to the members of our audience?
Oh man, as far as spiritual teachings, I would say things like the Buddha would say, "No man is an island unto himself." And so how I would draw that up to the child would just be, you are not independent and you're going to need other people. So you need to be fair and just with other people and work with other people who are workable with. Obviously, you're not going to be able to to do everything with everyone, right? But find those people who are like-minded and build those relationships.
Now, let's go into the idea of useful solutions to being a good father. So, what's everyone's take on instilling discipline in our children, being fathers? I mean, because there's definitely a stand, like Custer's Last Stand in the United States, in terms of in terms of social services. What I'm talking about, in terms of social services and instilling discipline. So, on in one respect, since we mentioned the brother Bill Cosby, one of his views about discipline has always been that parents should not hit their children; they should talk to their children. So, in terms of our backgrounds and how we see discipline, I mean, how do we instill discipline from this high on up? I just want to pass that around the round table.
I can't say I disagree with Bill Cosby to a degree. I know, for instance, my father, although he wasn't around all my life, he was till I was around 4. And then later on in life, I talked to him, and he said he never wanted to spank me because he never wanted me to fear another man raising his hand to me. So he would just talk to me. Now, there does need to be a point to where the person you're talking to can understand what it is that you're saying, right? So you're obviously not gonna, like, for you, God, your child is 1.5 years. You're not gonna sit down and be like, all right, well, based on mathematics and and draw it out like that to him. He's gonna look at you like, huh? What? I want to go play. Dude. What are you talking about? So you may need to use, not that you need to spank him, but maybe a tap in the hand. There's got to be some other thing, because words at that point don't necessarily get the whole gist across.
Sure indeed.
Right, it's just a matter of getting their attention, so then you could speak to them.
Yeah.
You can't speak to, we as adults, we know that we can't speak to people if they're in a certain mind state.
Right. I was gonna say we can't speak to people in our age group.
That's
half
what I'm
the time.
saying. Yeah. So if somebody's if someone gets hot and worked up over something, you can't have a logical conversation with that person.
Yeah.
So there needs to be something to break that. And then now they'll be open to it. Not saying that you have to physically try to dominate your child,
right?
But something to snap them out of it real quick. I don't see an issue with that. No.
Yeah.
Right. And you know, and that's the thing is, we're not talking about going overboard, maybe like my mother. But you got to think she was raising two male children.
Yeah.
So in some cases, when you are physically um, attempting to injure a child, as opposed to physically disciplining them, those are two different realms.
Yeah.
The child knows it, and so do you.
Mm-hmm.
And even when you have to get physical with your child in terms of instilling discipline, um, that will not change their feeling about you and their relationship.
Right.
Because you know, when I've had to get to implement physical discipline for my son, you know, minutes later after the tears are all cleared up, and I've had a conversation about why I had to do that, right? Because that's what's important to me is the conversation after, or maybe some of you have a conversation before about why you're administering discipline. Yeah, this is why
Before,
I'm gonna
during,
do
and
this.
after sometimes.
Before,
Yeah.
during, and after. There you go. You know, knowledge, wisdom, understanding. So the whole reality is, you know, however you approach it, just make sure it's not going to injure the child physically and it's mentally, and it's not going to injure the relationship between you and your child.
Mm-hmm.
You know, because I can tell you, in some point, sometime in the near future, I had this wonderful student, and I'm gonna say her name. Her name is Treasure. That shared her life story with my class, and a member of her family, you know, basically physically abused her in terms of like hitting her with an object, and she wound up going to school and her head was bleeding, and actually it was a teacher who pointed that out to her, and you know, she shared that with my to my students to show the I guess the limitations that should be placed on disciplining a child.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Sure.
So yeah, it's pretty heavy stuff, but just keep that in mind. We're not trying to draw blood here.
Yeah, it's like I said, you come back to the animal kingdom.
Mm-hmm.
You know, if a lion cub does something that the mother's not agreeing with,
mm-hmm. She nips out of it.
Yeah, the mother's gonna snap him out of it. It's basically you're just teaching that child the laws of the land.
Yeah, for sure.
Because if you don't do it, when they go out in the world, they're gonna learn the laws, and by then it's too late.
It's too late.
You know what I mean? So
to quote Dr. Umar Johnson, he was like, "So you're crying now that your kid is in an orange jumpsuit, but where were you when the child was 2? Where were you when the child was 5?
Right.
You know what I mean? So it's like you gotta be there.
Mm-hmm.
Sure indeed. So I guess we should get into the do, view, and read portion of the show. I guess I'll just hand it over to.
Yeah, I'll do the do.
Yeah, thank you.
So please do talk to an elder of your family or a community elder to gain a better view of the structure of traditional family and the things that they went through and experienced and what held their family together.
I think that's very important because, you know, the elders they're dying. The individuals who lived through the so-called civil rights movement and those types of things, who came from a place where there was more traditional family, are dying off. So we got to take as much from them as we can before they pass. Right. You know what I mean?
Right.
I think that's really important.
No doubt.
We're asking you to view Sankofa, and you know what? You might as well watch something about the COINTELPRO. That's one thing I forgot to mention. One of the tenets of the COINTELPRO was that they were to neutralize the rise of a black messiah. So that would be the black father that we're talking about. That's the one who's going to save the children.
That's a great one.
So check out anything about the COINTELPRO and read those things that the program was about. And what are we going to read?
One book I read when, you know, my black woman was pregnant is called The Expectant Father. That definitely eased a lot of, you know, some of the things that I was dealing with and going through my head. So anyone who's expecting a child or has a child is definitely a good read right there.
Can you repeat that title for me?
The Expectant Father.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then there's another one, Letters to a Young Brother by Hill Harper. And that's a good one that you can read, to your teenage son or daughter.
True indeed. Well, we would like to. I mean, unless we have some other comments, no, we get.
Take it home.
True indeed. I would like to thank, first of all, my righteous brothers. It's always a pleasure to build with them, and we'd like to thank all of you for viewing today, and we look forward to speaking with you next week. Until then, saying peace, Knowledge Yourself Radio Show. Peace.
Peace.